PTBO Morning Drive, starting your day with what you need to know.
And here's what you need to know this morning, and that is that NFL action is finally back on the field. We can put to rest a tiresome offseason that felt like it dragged on forever. We are joined right now on the line by New York Giant great and current CBS sports personality, Tiki Barber. Tiki, I don't want to put any pressure on you, but we had your man Andrew Bogish on the show yesterday.
Bogish, I love Bogey. What did he have to say? Was he talking Mets baseball? Tell me he was talking Mets baseball.
No, we had a little bit. We were talking a little bit Patriots, Steelers. We talked a little Deflategate. I think he did get a little Mets in there as well. So
he had to. He's an enormous fan. If he wouldn't, I would feel disappointed in him.
No doubt he did a fantastic job. But, Tiki, I'm always curious. This time of year, you're a former, NFL great. You played many years in the league. What are the feelings like around opening day? Do you still kind of get those butterflies?
Yeah, a little bit, because, it becomes the intense part of the year where fandom really peaks as far as, our callers on our radio show and, what people are interested in. The NFL has been king for a while now, and it's continuing to go that way, despite some of the negativity that's been around the game. And I know you talked about the Deflategate stuff, and we've been hitting it ad nauseum since the AFC Championship game back in January. But in some ways, it created a different level of interest, a non between the white lines conversation about the game and where it's going. And while some people would say it's detrimental, it's going to adversely affect the league, I don't think it is, because at the end of the day, what are you competing with if you're watching football, or if you're a football producer, a show producer? You're competing with reality television. You're creating with these other opportunities to spend disposable income. The NFL has kind of captured all of that market, and it's relevant every month of the year for 12 months of the year, which is something that's hard to do for a sports franchise that only goes through December, or goes through really February with the Super Bowl.
Tiki, I'm really glad you mentioned that. I feel exactly the same way. I don't see it having any sort of impact, even though as a society, I think we all take that stand that we have to look away before anything will change. But I don't see that happening, because we absolutely love football. We were talking a little bit earlier about fantasy football. Did you used to get annoyed when people would come up to you and tell you were costing them points?
Oh, I hated it. It was like, why'd you let Brandon Jacobs score that touchdown? I was like, because my coach pulled me out of the game. You think I wanted to go all the way down to the 1 yard line and to get put on the sideline while Brandon scored? And by the way, that's the one rushing record that I don't have in New York Giants history. Brandon Jacobs beat me by one touchdown over the course of his career. He has 56. I had 55. But yeah, fantasy is it's. But I also realized. And this was after I retired, because it wasn't congruent with my goals when I was playing. But after I retired, I realized how people outside of New York, and even outside of Virginia where I grew up, they knew who I was. They knew my stats, and they knew what I meant to my team, not because they watched me necessarily, but because they had me on their fantasy sports team. And that brand building is so important for athletes, especially as they transition out of the game and get into whatever it is they're going to do next.
That was another question I was going to ask you, just as someone who has no athletic achievements to speak of. Do you keep track of the records? Obviously, the 1 year you rushed for, 1,800 and something yards. Do you look at that and say, you know what, I hope the New York Giants running backs have good seasons, but I do not want them to go over that mark?
It's funny, because the game, I do, and it's weird looking at it, because I kind of feel like some of those old records for a lot of teams, not just mine, with the Giants, are untouchable because of the by committee that you see in the NFL these days, right? There were points in games, and I remember this specifically. The coach would want me to come out and be like, "Oh, you need a breather," and I'm like, "No, I'm fine." And I'd wave whoever the backup was off, because I wanted to be in the game. I wanted to be that guy, and I would end up getting 25 carries and 6 or 7 receptions, and do that throughout the course of a year. That just doesn't happen anymore, right? It's by committee. There's maybe 5 teams that have a running back that can take that many snaps in a game. And none of them were at the Giants right now. So yeah, to a point, I know that those records will exist for a long time. But at the same time, it is kind of fulfilling.
And Tiki, I want to ask you about two of the teams that went to the Super Bowl last year. It's so tough to get back there year after year. I'll start with the Patriots. Do you think there's any real challenger in the AFC? And do you think any of the stuff this offseason with Deflategate and Tom Brady being in court is going to play a factor? Or is Belichick going to have him ready?
No, I'll discount all the distraction talk in the offseason. If there's one team that can put anything aside and focus on the game at hand, it's the New England Patriots. Let's not forget that Aaron Hernandez was not that long ago for this New England Patriots team, and they were either in the AFC Championship game or winning a Super Bowl in the years that it was affecting them. That's not the issue. The bigger issue is, do they have the talent anymore on the New England Patriots? I know the defense is going to be good. They lost some things in the secondary, which are going to be enormous with Brandon Browner and Darrelle Revis both being gone. They lose Vince Wilfork as well. He wasn't a starter, but he was a stalwart in the locker room for that Patriots side of the defense. But more importantly, for Tom Brady. Right, Brian Stork, who was their starting center, is out on the short-term IR. They're probably going to end up starting a rookie at some place on that offensive line. And LeGarrette Blount suspended. They've had injury issues in the wide receiving core. So who are the stars on that team other than Tom Brady? That worries you a little bit. If there's a team that I see unseating them, it's probably the Colts. And the Colts have been on the come, right? They're 11-5 for the last 3 seasons and getting bounced in the first round of the playoffs. But when you have veteran guys like Andre Johnson, who they picked up from the Texans, and Frank Gore, who they got from the San Francisco 49ers, it's going to be a more methodical, old-school way of playing the game of football in Indianapolis, and I think that benefits them in the long run, especially when they get to the playoffs.
A quick glance at the NFC, Tiki. Who are the mainstays there?
Well, Philly is interesting, especially if Sam Bradford stays healthy, because of, we only saw him in a couple of preseason games, but when he was in those games, I think obviously the Packers are a team you have to look at. Aaron Rodgers did what he did last year. He was hurt. Remember, he was limping around in the playoffs and still almost beat the Seattle Seahawks, and they should have beat the Seattle Seahawks if it wasn't for a gaffe on a special teams play on an onside kick. So even with Jordy Nelson banged up and out for the season with the ACL, there's so much talent offensively with the Packers. The wide receiving core from Devontae Adams and Randall Cobb, who's having a little bit of a shoulder issue, but it's really just pain. It's nothing structural. And then Ty Montgomery, the rookie from Stanford, to go with Eddie Lacy. There's so many weapons for the best quarterback in the National Football League. I don't see how you keep them from getting deep in the postseason again.
He is Tiki Barber, and you can catch Tiki and Tierney right here on Extra 90.5 weekdays immediately following the John Badham Show. You mentioned you were raised in Virginia. You became a household name in New York, but guess what? You're a household name in Peterborough, Ontario, and that's something to hold your hat on.
Oh, I like that. I've never been to Peterborough, Ontario. I've only been to Toronto and Vancouver up that way. I covered the Olympics, which was fun up there, even though they got snowed out for a couple of days, and they taught me how to snowboard. I almost killed myself. But I've had fun every single time I've been north of the border.
Well, you've always got a spot here. Tiki, thank you so much for taking the time today. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Have a good one.
Coming up after the break on Peterborough Morning Drive, we will get to today's impossible question. You're listening to Talk Sports Radio, Extra 90.5.